everybody, and welcome to episode 12 of the Pixar Post Podcast. I'm TJ.
And I'm Julie.
And this is our second part in a three-part series of the Monsters University event that Julie went to. Last week, we talked about the world of Monsters University. This week, we're going to talk about the characters from Monsters University. And next week, we're going to talk about some more of the technical details. So what else are we going to talk about on this episode before we get to it, though? We're going to talk about the characters that we created on Twitter for Monsters University. We're going to talk about the Toy Story of Terror announcement, and then we're also going to talk about the big news for today was Brad Bird's announcement, or his interview, where he discussed that he would at least be open to the potential of looking at...
nothing was confirmed. It's all speculation. It's just him saying, you know what, yeah, I've thought about it. That's it.
Exactly. But we're still excited about it.
It's excited to hear that he has said publicly, you know what, yeah, I've thought about it. But that could mean so many things. I mean, it is, awesome to think that, he wrote it and he directed The Incredibles, to know that, I've thought about, diving into these characters' lives once again. Right.
Yeah, and it's funny because his quote was, I have been thinking about it. People think that I have not been, but I have. And it's because he's usually so radio silence on it. Mm-hmm. There's usually no talk, no discussion as far as if this is going to happen. And this is the most requested sequel. We've talked about it. Other people have talked about it. It's no secret.
Right. Well, he's also been really busy with his live action directorial roles.
Yeah. So I was actually excited to hear him even talking about The Incredibles from the standpoint of getting back to animation, because as you know, I love his directing style.
Yes,
every time we watch one of the movies, I always comment, the way it's directed, the scene that we were just watching the other day was the scene where Mr. Incredible has put in the password in Syndrome's lair, and all those almost tar.
The homing device goes off in
his suit.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
She's just smiling at me on the opposite side of this microphone.
No, you're a little wrong, little off.
Well, So anyways, he sends out the homing beacon, and all of those almost tar balls are coming, and as they hit him, they expand. Every time I see that scene, the way it cuts, the speed of the cuts, the angles that he chooses, how it's a little tilted when he sees, the woman, Syndrome's lady coming in and all that other kind of stuff. It's just amazing. I can't get enough. Mm-hmm. So anyways, so the other thing that he talks about is, and I'm just going to quote him originally. It says, I love those characters and love that world. He's talking about, of course, The Incredibles. I am stroking my chin and scratching my head. I have many, many elements that I think would work really well in another Incredibles film. And if I can get them to click all together, I would probably want to do that. So obviously, again, we've posted this out there a couple hours ago, and by the time we're doing this recording, the comments that we've already received are almost more than anything else within that time frame.
Right.
People are excited about it.
Yeah.
But the other thing that he says that I really loved this part of his comment is, I'm looking for ways to accelerate the pace a little bit and figure out a way to keep creative control over these movies to a level where I'm comfortable with the end result, but also speed them up a bit and make more of them. So I like the fact that he says he wants more creative control, because to me, if he's craving that, that's another element that says he's coming back to animation. Because in the world of, live action movies, he's not going to have as much control as he would in Pixar.
I would tend to agree with that.
Yeah, and I think that, because, he's already revered as one of the best. People love him. Mm-hmm. They love all the rest of the brain trust as well. But I think that, if he comes in, they're giving a lot of roles to new directors. If he comes back and says, kind of like an Andrew Stanton doing Finding Dory, he's already proven himself with The Incredibles. He'd have even more creative control when it came to
The Incredibles
2 if they did that. But the other thing that we wanted to talk about, just as a little bit of fun in regards to The Incredibles, is if they do come back with this, and this sequel does happen, let's just say it does, are they going to pick up where they left off and have them be the same age, kind of after the Underminer kind of thing? Mm-hmm. Or are they going to come back in and grow them up many years later, over 10 years later, a decade over? Right. So now you'd have Dash in college, probably. You'd have Violet graduated from college.
Yeah.
So how would that work as a family dynamic? Would it still be the same family dynamic, all of a sudden picking back up years later? Or would it have to be that you just pick up where you left off?
It would be kind of hard, because it seems like Jack would be the only one left at home.
Right.
The other two would be gone, so it would be like a dynamic of 3.
Right.
Which could work. And, I mean, there's so many amazing story points that could be brought on that. You know, Jack's powers, obviously we know from the short, but to really dive into that, to have a baby have powers, it might have to be maybe like 5 years past, like where The Incredibles left off.
I don't know.
I feel that Dash still needs to be a kid.
Yeah.
Because he's very endearing. Like the way he runs and stuff.
If he's not a kid...
Like a college student and he runs fast like that,
right, it's not
I don't know if I could... I mean, I don't know.
Yeah,
it's just
who knows?
My thought.
Yeah, it's because they would be potentially, and this is one of our readers already commented that, leave it alone. It's already great.
Right.
We don't want to potentially change the, the feel of the movie, and I can understand it from that standpoint because we're already giving our opinions right now that we wouldn't necessarily like to see it move forward as much. But again, that's without hearing anything about the story. We're just taking it from our own experience of what we know from the first Incredibles, the only Incredibles at this point.
Right.
So I just thought it was interesting to think about of how would they tackle that, because with him saying he's stroking his chin and scratching his head, I could see that. Mm-hmm. There's got to be a million ways in his mind that he could go with these characters, seeing as he created them.
Right.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is. It was definitely an interesting point to be brought up today.
Yeah. So it really kind of intrigued us.
Mm-hmm.
So the next thing we wanted to talk about, there was also an announcement for the Toy Story of Terror. And last year, around October of last year, we got the announcement that there would be a 30-minute made-for-TV short film. And we now know that the new short will air in the fall, probably just a week or so before Halloween, called Toy Story of Terror. And it's going to be directed by Angus MacLean, who previously did Bernie as well as Small Fry, those two shorts. And obviously Bernie was with Wall-E on the DVD, and then Small Fry was with the Muppets in theaters. So the plot, I'm just going to read it as this is a combination of the plot that we knew from last October when we initially got the announcement, and then also the new plot that the TV Guide interview pointed out. So Bonnie's on a road trip to go see Grandma with her mom, and the toys are in the trunk. Mom gets a flat tire, and they have to spend a night in a motel, and all kinds of chaos ensues. So the other plot point we had is what starts out as a fun road trip for the Toy Story gang takes an unexpected turn for the worse when the trip detours to a roadside motel. After one of the toys goes missing, the others find themselves caught up in a mysterious sequence of events that must be solved before they all suffer the same fate in this Toy Story of Terror.
I can't wait to see who gets lost.
Honestly,
I was thinking about it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, who could it be? Could it be Rex? Could he have just gotten distracted and wandered away? Maybe it's, Mr. Pricklepants.
So here's my take on it. We also now know that it stars Jessie as the main character. Mm-hmm. So I kind of was torn on the idea of, is Jessie the one that's missing? Because that would obviously make her the main character, because it would be the camera's on her.
That's true.
But how engaging is that going to be with her freaking out alone, or wandering around while the others think that she's been kidnapped or something like that? Mm-hmm. So it's interesting to think about what's going to happen there, because my first thought was she's the one that's missing if they're saying she's the main character, because if not, I'm assuming, because it says that they must figure it out as sounding like they have to figure it out as a group before they all suffer the same fate.
But in the screenshot, we see
Buzz, Woody, and Jessie all together.
Right. So I guess that could have been when they found her.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, that's actually a good thought there.
Right. Now, the other thing that we also know is that in addition to Jessie being the main character, the other sub characters that are going to be more prominent in this one are going to be Mr. Pricklepants.
Mm-hmm. One of our favorites.
Oh my God. Yes, and stay in character.
Yes.
And Trixie. So Trixie's that dinosaur. There's nothing. There's a dinosaur down the street.
Yeah.
Like that. So I am excited to see Mr. Pricklepants. He's going to be hilarious if he's freaked out or if he's the one that's lost.
Yes.
That's going to be awesome. So I'm excited to see him get more of a central role because I can't get enough. Timothy Dalton doing his voice, amazing. Mm-hmm. The fact that he always stays in character. And then I have a little special place in my heart for him because I didn't know this, but when I went to the animation masterclass last year in Chicago, the day before the first class, I drew Mr. Pricklepants, and it's on our fan art page on our iPad just sitting in the hotel room. And the next day I find out that Matt Lunn, the head story guy, is the guy that created him. And based on one of his childhood favorite toys that he kind of like threw together and mixed together, and then I showed it to him and he was like, oh, that's really good. So I mean, I thought that was really like, I have a special place now because of it.
Personal
it's connection. A little bond.
Yeah.
It's a little bond with Mr. Pricklepants. He got me some kudos from Matthew Lunn, and I'll take it.
Yes.
So okay, next thing we want to talk about, we had some fun this week, or I should say Julie's had a lot of fun this week with a series of Twitter accounts that she created. So explain what they are and why you created them.
Oh, goodness. Well, I was stuck in traffic driving home. I was either driving home or to work. Can't remember which, but most of my ideas come from when I'm stuck in traffic.
So note to self,
yes.
Get stuck in traffic a lot more because this is a cool idea.
Yeah, and keep a notepad and pens right next to you.
Or just call me, which is what you always do. I got this idea.
We need to do this.
Yeah.
No, I decided social media has definitely changed the way we all communicate to each other, and especially college kids. I mean, TJ and I are very removed from college, granted that we're in our 30s, but I thought, the Monsters University students would have Twitter feeds.
Absolutely.
If they were actual characters, if they were real. Then it got me thinking...
They are real.
Yes. Then it got me thinking, I should make them. I should make parody accounts.
Right.
But, as I was thinking this, I was like, I'll just do Uzma Kappa. And then I'm like, I can't just do the brothers of Uzma Kappa. I need to have another fraternity. And so then I started making Roar Omega Roar, which has 6 fraternity members. 7 if you include, I did make a fraternity tweet, a fraternity page as well. And then I got to Fear Tech. And then I got to the Greek Council.
Oh, of course, you got to have Brock.
And then I made Miss Squibbles, Squishy's mom.
Right.
And then I made a couple art students. I think I've made a little over 20 accounts. They're
right.
all on our website, and they tweet. Not everyone tweets every day, but I would say the majority of them tweet multiple times a day.
And they're not talking about anything related to the movie because they obviously don't know that they're in a movie. This is their Twitter accounts that we're peering in on.
Yes.
So... Again, like Julie said, all of them are listed on our website, but if you go to episode 12 show notes, if you just click on the podcast button, click on episode 12, it'll link through to that article, so that way you wouldn't have to necessarily dig through if you're listening to this past, this most recent week, and then you can follow through there. But what's just the Uzma Kappa...
At Uzma Kappa.
At Uzma Kappa. Fantastic. So that's one you could even just look up and just get started with. Mm-hmm. And then you'll see some of the chatter going back and forth. Like you did one today with Archie the Scare Pig. It was kind of fun. And...
Right. Yeah. All of our accounts... We'll favorite other followers' tweets, but we're not going to communicate with other followers because these people don't know humans. Like, the monsters don't know humans, so they're only talking to monsters. So I just want to let everyone know that because a lot of people have been talking back and forth to the monsters or talking to the monsters. But I just want to say the monsters are only talking to each other because they're not part of the human world.
Right. And we wouldn't know that. What's cool, though, is I love the one that you've created for Chet.
Yes.
He's that crab-like character.
Yes.
And he's like, that's a good point.
Yes, for Roar Omega Roar. If you've seen any of the trailers, that's all he says.
Well, he says other things, too.
That is a good point.
And what is it? Johnny tells him, calm down, and he goes, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I use a couple lines from the trailers, a couple, I don't know. I'm having a lot of fun. We're getting so much positive feedback, emails, tweets.
Crazy the followers that they've already gained within the last couple of days. But if you're not following them and you want to see some good comedy going back and forth, let's just follow along and
it's just kind of fun. It's keeping me on my toes with my improv stuff. So.
Yeah, we'll keep doing some fun tweets out there. So let's kick into the podcast series, part 2 of the 3-part series. Again, like we mentioned, today is going to look into more of the character elements. So we're going to talk about deconstruction of a character, bringing a character to life, and then we're going to talk about the how to tell a great story element. So the first portion that we're going to talk about, well, before we play anything, let's talk a little bit. Is it weird that I'm sitting directly across from Julie and I'm totally jealous of her? Because as I review these, the audio, and again, the audio, just so everybody knows, it takes a lot of time to edit that because it's not like, Jason Deamer, who we're going to hear from, is mic'd. Ours is sitting on the table, so as he moves around the room, there's a lot of ups and downs that we have to do, so I get really intimate with the audio of it.
Right.
And I'm totally jealous of the fact that Julie was able to be there and experience all this. Like the fact that, when you get to some of the character drawings, you're going to hear about Pitch Doctor, which is their storyboarding program, or Presto. She got to see the actual Presto animation system, which is what they use. So how cool is it seeing those things, just experiencing the program, seeing Kelsey Mann draw his storyboards on the Cintiq with the Wacom tablet. I mean, is it just crazy?
Yeah, you know what? It was very surreal. And actually, Kelsey's class was my favorite class, which we'll get to coming up. But seeing the Presto software, which was shown to us by Supervising Animator Scott Clark, was fascinating.
Is it very technical?
It is very technical. I mean, I was geeking out, which means you would have been in geek heaven.
I would have passed out right in that class.
Yes.
I mean, just the fact that when he's talking about it, and you guys will hear it, he's talking about it shows all of the control points on Sully's wrist, and then he talks about the fact we'll get to that when we get there, but it's just crazy, all the technical elements and the Z points and
yeah, it's really technical. I mean, I don't know if many people think that computer animation, it's so easy. I mean, I watched it for 25 minutes showing, he was showing us how he moved slightly Sully's hand, and it was complex. There's so many different elements that you have to move and change. And it really is a craft. To break down
an action. So just to say, imagine your arm down by your right leg, your right arm down by your right leg, and then you have to just raise it up and point a finger to the sky. That alone is, a couple seconds of action if you go pretty slow, or it's about a second of action if you go slow. That's 24 frames that you have to animate. So you have to know how to break down a 1-second action into 24 actions.
Right.
That's amazing. And if you think about that, they're getting these,
And not just that. When you move, you're not just moving one body part.
No, everything's in tandem.
You don't just move one shoulder, the next shoulder. Your whole body is moving when you're moving.
Right.
So you're not just animating just one thing. You're animating a whole character.
Right. A shoulder shrug means a head tilt, means a hip tilt, means your
chest bump.
Yeah, right. Your eye's going to come down a little bit. There's so much, and I have no clue how they keep track of all that. And obviously, that's what separates the great animators from the okay animators, and that's why we love Pixar.
This line of code, or the spleens or the splines or whatever.
Yeah.
Spleens. That was awesome.
They don't animate the character's
internal
spleens.
Organs.
Right, they don't do that. There's no beating heart in there.
It was so lengthy. It was so involved. I sat right next to the monitor, so I was able to see it, directly, and just really immerse myself into holy smokes, this is intense.
Right. Okay, so let's get into it. The first one that we're going to talk about is with Jason Deamer, who is the character art director on Monsters University, as well as Ricky Nierva, who is the production designer on the film. And the class is Sociology 203, the deconstruction of a character. And we wanted to start with this one because it really gives a great background of how Ricky and Jason both worked on Monsters, Inc. as well. And they're both young guys, totally jealous. and the fact that how they came up with these characters and the evolution of the characters and how Dean Hardscrabble, we'll talk about that at the after you guys listen to it. So take a listen here, listen to the great background of the characters, and then we'll pick back up after.
Welcome to Sociology 203, the deconstruction of a character. You will all start with A's, and it's up to you to maintain that. All right. Those are the jokes, people.
Where were you when I was in?
I'm Ricky Nierva, and I'm the production designer of Monsters University.
And I'm Jason Deamer, and I'm the art director of the characters.
And Jason and I are really proud to be showing you guys kind of the development of the characters for Monsters University, because we worked on Monsters Incorporated as well. I was the lead character designer, so I helped design Mike and Sully and all these characters, and so did Jason. And this honestly, being a prequel and being a college movie, and you see these characters that everyone loves, no one loved from Monsters Inc., seeing them in college, it's a challenge because we had to make their college versions of themselves. And but then the technology is so advanced now that I didn't want, as production designer, didn't want to lose the essence of these characters and make them too, I don't know if it's not right to say it. It need to maintain that original flavor. But it's really difficult to make a younger version of a character that you know. A sequel has its advantages, you just move forward from it. But with a prequel, you have to go backwards and you already know what the end product will be. So we did a few things. Jason will go into the details of kind of what we did to make them younger versions. But it was initially a difficult challenge for us. And someone came into my office when I was working on Mike, the younger Mike, and it's like, well, how do you make an eyeball 18 years old? And it was a challenge. And Jay, you want to talk about what we did?
So one of the first things we did when we knew we had this problem is we asked everybody in the entire film crew to bring in their senior class portraits, so we could have a good laugh at each other, but also because we wanted the A-B comparison between 18-year-old and adult, and it proved to be kind of a difficult problem if you think about it. Making something into like a real childlike state is a little bit easier of a problem. You can just push way farther. But 18, you're basically adult-like in your frame already. But so the differences between 18 and a little bit older are a little more subtle. And one of the first things that you notice is, in most cases, people are usually more svelte. So just to go through what we did to Mike, one of the first things we did is we took a lot of weight out of his midsection. Wasn't a lot of room to go because it's just a green ball, but we also skinnied up his legs and his arms, while at the same time we kept his hands and feet at adult scale, with the idea that like a puppy he would have to grow into them. We took all the blemishes and any wrinkling in the eye bag out of him. We took his green color and we saturated it slightly, made it more vibrant, while at the same time we made him translucent, so light would penetrate and make his skin feel a little bit more soft. We also took his horns and made them a little short nubs, with the idea that, as a monster, your horns would grow through your lifespan. But, with all that being said, if I take away the direct comparison, what you remember of Mike Wazowski is just a green ball with legs and arms, and that's what you get from that. And in fact, after we did our first initial pass of all those subtle changes to the characters, we showed them to John Lasseter and to some other Brain Trust people, and that was the note we got. They're like, it looks like Mike and Sully, which that's good. We start from scratch, that's hard. But they're like, we can't tell that they're 18. So it became clear that we were going to have to be a little more obvious about it and kind of hit the audience over the head with a little bit more. And we came up with what we like to call their visual hook, or a visual cue that would just make it more obvious. And with Mike, we gave him a retainer, and he also wears a baseball cap at times.
Yeah. So with Sully, it was the same thing. Back in Monsters Incorporated, the challenge was fur and Boo's shirt. We had a whole department dedicated to just figuring out Sully's fur. But for MU, it's like, fur is easy, cloth is easy now. So we did the same thing. We saturated his color, skinnied him up, made his horn blunter, removed the eye bags. But it was still, we added a little faux hawk, a little tuft of hair on his head. But the fur grooming was a big deal. We got this tufts of hair going in different places. This bedhead look, because the college-age kids will just roll out of bed and go to his class. And we wanted to get this tussle look because it's like he's not that motivated in school. But Pete Docter saw this and really liked it because he said that was the kind of look that we were wishing we had on Monsters Incorporated. But it was all these things put together to really capture that essence of a younger Sully. But you can see here with Randall, or Randy, the younger version, if you don't have this to A and B compared to, it just looks the same. We did the same. It's like saturated color, skinning them up, remove the eye bags. But it wasn't that obvious, so we came up with the visual cue of adding glasses. And that was really a great thing because it helped with the gag, or inspired the gag from Story where he removes his glasses and you get that quintessential squint that you remember. It's that familiarity you remember from the original, from the Monsters Incorporated Randall. And so, it's very serendipitous that with these cues that it helped inspire this great idea that connects it back to Monsters Incorporated. This board is the Uzma Kappa fraternity, or the OK frat, and this is the frat that Mike and Sully have to join. And these new characters are amazing. I love, this is Terry and Terry Perry, the two Siamese brothers that share the same body, and they're at odds with each other at times, and then, because they're stuck with each other, hilarity ensues. We designed them, with any sibling, as you would, if anyone with siblings know, that they can get into,
get under your skin.
Get under your skin, any, a way that only your sibling can. And, we even just kind of shove them as close together, head to high as possible. This is Scott Squibby, Scott Squishy Squibbles, Squishy. And, there's always that type of character or that type of college student that is, still mobile, undefined. His major is undeclared. He's just kind of this young, lump of kind of multiple stuff because he's still trying to figure himself out. I mean, we had some inspiration while we were designing it, right?
Cool. So Dan early on described him as that, everyone has that experience with a character that is not grown into himself yet. So we thought really early of looking at inspiration of pliable materials, and we looked at a lot of gummy candies that, colorless, squishy gummy candies, and, very early on he was even designed to look like a gummy candy. But we eventually came across, have you guys ever had mochi balls before? Yeah. So we found mochi balls and we were like, perfect, it's soft and pliable, but they're super appealing too. They have a nice powdery surface, and it was important that he was lovable. So we basically gave detailed photographs of mochi balls to the shading team to even shade them just like mochi ball. But at the same time, also designed him to be childlike, again, to reinforce the idea that he's not fully developed as an adult yet.
And then we have the mature student, Don Carlton. He is, he worked in sales before going to college for a long time and decided to leave sales and go back to school and learn the computers. And he's kind of based upon like a dragon look thing where I love this wing motif for his mustache, and he's been in sales for a long time.
So we figured he would still have the same garments that he had from his office job, so we gave him a well-washed and worn and faded polo shirt. That's when you wash a shirt too many times, it kind of rides up a little bit, and made him a little bit wider in his midsection from all his days sitting behind a computer. And Ricky actually came up with this design for these glasses, which I love. They're just like these. They have this like outdated 70s quality to them.
And then we have art. Every campus has this weird, mysterious student. What's this guy's what is art? What's his last? Does he have last name? How old is this guy? Where did he come from? It's this character is so enigmatic, but like so lovable. It's like he does so many cool things. His shape is so unique that the animators are really inspired to get him in the mood. And do you want to talk about his design?
It's like Ricky said, early on with him was like, this is the character that nobody knows anything about, which is kind of not a lot to go on when you're trying to figure out what to design at first. but we figured he's sort of like the hippie, like vagabond hippie kind of character, and that's where the idea of bell bottoms and his hair being a little bit more dreaded and feeling came from. But during the process of designing him, the idea that he might eventually become a motivational speaker came out, and so we started looking at that kind of thing, and we looked at. Do you guys ever see that skit with Chris Farley in Saturday Night Live where he talks about being in the van down by the river? So that came up, and like we were just started drawing him kind of in that pose, and then those drawings kind of evolved over time to where like the arms end up connected between his legs, which is really bizarre, but like somehow in Monsters World makes sense and just made it so unique and crazy, and then it evolved in, I think, finally that rainbow leg shape, which he turned out to be one of my favorite characters just because it's so bizarre and reminds me of a Muppet.
Mrs. Squibbles.
Oh yeah, and then lastly we had Mrs. Squibbles, who, with her the idea was that she, was early on, she's like your friend's mom who you love, who takes care of you, makes you finger sandwiches when you're over playing at the house. But there's also all these hints in the story of her being like, I don't know if you saw this part in the bit of the movie you saw where she's listening to music in a car, but there's many references to her having this, being cool, having other stuff going on. And so with her design, we thought, even though she's a mother, she's still got a life going on. So she's, she's got curlers in her hair because she's probably going out that night. She's got plans later when the kids go off and do their thing. So once we had our main cast and our secondary characters all designed, we then began to design the rest of the ensemble cast around them. And this is the character lineup, which you can see some of the other characters that you'll be meeting when you see the rest of the film. So this is sort of an evolving document that we change throughout the production of the whole film. As the story evolves, the characters get added or removed, or we actually get the final designs, we'll place them in there and pull them out. This actual one took me 2.5 years to get to this complete state. And we do it just so you can see them all together as a group, to see all the relative scales, hence the line work. And to make sure there's a nice variety of shapes, that the shapes work together, that there's a nice variety of color going on. But also, it's just a great tool, logistical tool, in that you can imagine all these characters going to production all at the same time, with 300 people building them, and we're trying to keep our heads around what the hell's going on. So having this just in the background in the office, during meetings is really useful, just to be like, when we're thinking, what is anybody, what's going on with her? It's just something to point at. It's useful.
So what's nice about this is you get to see all the new fraternities and sorority groups that we've designed, and all the new characters that we've been along love. But this board here I'm really proud of because this is the background character pool. And I talked about the challenges for Monsters Incorporated being the fur and the cloth and different things like that. With this one, the big challenge was the sheer volume of characters that we're going to have for this movie. And I'm really proud of how we created this beautiful campus, and how do we populate this campus? How do we expand the world that Monsters Incorporated had? And we want to expand that. And out of 6 body types, fungus, slug, Charlie, block, spiff, and pill, these body types made almost 300 new characters, background characters, that help populate this world and make it just richer. So we want to spend a little bit of time talking about one character that actually was one of the most challenging and most satisfying characters that we've worked on. This is Dean Archstrap.
So in the 15 years I've now been at Pixar, this turned out to be the most challenging thing that I've worked on. The thing is that on one hand, she is the dean of a college, right? She needed to be graceful and put together and scholastic in her design. At the same time in the story, they talk about her being the most successful character, or successful scarer, I should say, in all of Instropolis. So she needed to be inherently scary in her appearance, or at least capable of achieving that. And those two things didn't really reconcile that well together when we were trying to come up with designs. And to compound the problem, we redesigned her completely 6 weeks before she was meant to be in shop production. And when I say 6 weeks, that includes the modeling, the rigging, and shading, which actually left 3.5 weeks about for the art department to figure out what the hell we were going to do. So our first instinct was, so we had this is the male version of Art Scrabble, which we had done for like 1.5 years, and we're really proud of, actually. I still think it's a nice design, but So our first instinct was that we clung to that. We figured we'd make this into a female version of the same design, which turned out to be like trying to put lipstick onto a pig. It just didn't really work out. So we ended up pulling. We got the 2 original production designers from the first movie. We got a group of 9 artists all in a room, and we sat down and we brainstormed for weeks, and we tried everything you can imagine. And there's some examples of that here, but we, at any given time, she was a snake. She was based on a snake, a bat, a dragon, a butterfly, an owl, bird, scorpion. I mean, we tried anything we could imagine, and nothing seemed to hit. And as an example, this is one that was sort of based on a bird. I mean, this works really well as a dean of a college, but not necessarily as believable as the most scary monster that ever lived, right? So we did that over and over again, and it wasn't until in our research we came across this centipede here.
This is the Scolopendra gigantea, the giant centipede. And this thing is the creepiest thing that we've ever experienced. It is found in Peru and also Vietnam and Thailand. We got one of these things in here and for our research, and then we got an expert come in. This expert on, he deals with, venomous snakes and scorpions and poisonous spiders, and he handheld these things. So, when we brought this in and he came in, he started putting on these leather welding gloves, and he had these long metal tongs, and he's just like, you don't want to mess with this thing. And we had this thing in a Tupperware with a little plastic lid taped, like Scotch tape on it, in some poor coordinator's office. And he says, if you get bitten by one of these things, you are not gonna die, but you will wish for death. And so we were like, oh gosh, this is crazy. But we realized that this visceral reaction that people have to it, like everyone would say, but then the beauty that it had, like in its movement, the sine wave that the legs would have, and the gracefulness that it would have when it moved. The animators were so inspired, and the technical directors were like, oh my God, how are we going to do this? But we got to do it. It's so cool. I mean, we took this thing and videotaped it, and this expert gave it a cricket, and it's so gnarly. He would take this cricket, grab it, and like rip its head off and just eat it. And then he goes, check this out. So he would put in another one, and then the Scolopendra would look at it, take the cricket that it's eating and bring it down its body to its legs, all the way, hold it down near the tail, and just grab the other one and just eat it. So it would save the other one for later. And so when we watched that, the animator was like, how are we going to put that in the movie? We're going to do that. Unfortunately, we don't have that in the movie. It doesn't take Mike and bring her down her body. But it's this thing where, all these things just came together. It was at the same time creepy, inherently creepy, but graceful. And, we incorporated the bat wings, and then we even looked at horned lizards for her head design. We even thought about, at a certain point, she was the greatest scarer. So in Monster World, and, she had the money to wear fine garments. And, we looked at Coco Chanel design and these period garments, and with the wings, we shaded the back to kind of mix in with the, to kind of blend in with her jacket. But then if she needed to be scary, she could unfurl her wing. So it was a nice blend of kind of finding that beautiful balance between all the different challenges that we were facing in such a short period of time. When we got the design, it wasn't until Helen Mirren was cast, and she brought to this character the perfect thing. It's like the perfect balance of this gracefulness, this experience, this authority, this beautiful elegance, and it just, the planets aligned for this character, and it ended up being one of my favorite characters that we ever worked on.
Mine as well.
What is the name of the centipede?
Oh, the Scolopendra gigantea. Scolopendra, Scolopendra.
Significance of her name?
No, Hardscrabble actually came from a previous idea from the script. It was a plot device, and it just ended up the writers.
It's like the name stuck, and the plot device was out. Which happens all the time.
All right, so there you go. You heard some great background on the characters there. So one of the things that I had to talk about out of that was I love the details on how they made Mike and Sully look younger. But specifically on Mike, I love the fact that they said his hands were still full size, like he had to kind of grow into his hands, kind of like a puppy. They saturated his color more. He was a little skinnier, as they said, svelte. The skin was more translucent to make him look a little softer.
Which was really interesting because they had boards of all these photos, all these renderings of these characters in different stages, like, older, younger, goofier. So it was really neat to be able to see that. I mean, obviously you guys are listening to it, but you couldn't see kind of what they were pointing to. It was really, really awesome. Like I said before, I wish I could develop all the pictures in my head for you guys.
Yeah, but some of that concept art, again, the idea of it can be seen in either our concept art posts
or the Art of Monsters Inc. or Monsters University book,
which will be coming. What is that? May
out soon.
Yeah, it's in the middle of May there, so that's going to be great to have that as a guide to look through as well. But again, if you don't want any spoilers, don't open that book. You can pre-order it, but don't open it until after you see the movie, because they always end up revealing a lot of stuff, although it's good stuff. So also with Mike, all of his wrinkles are gone. He has a little smaller horns, all that kind of stuff. Just so cool. All of the layers of things that they have to think about, and not even have to think about, do think about. Crazy. I mean, if I think about, I would love to give myself a challenge, and I think we're going to have to do this, to try to come up with like a character and develop it within the monster world. We're not going to post about it, but I just want to try to do it as like a personal thing and see like what I could come up with, because how do you even start thinking along those lines? I love listening to this stuff. I mean, like I said, I'm totally jealous of you.
It's inspirational.
It's totally inspirational. So I also love the description of the characters and some of the details behind them, like the art discussion and the Chris Farley discussion. Okay, so in our Day 2 Monsters University event wrap-up post that you did, we included the screenshot. I found it online where Chris Farley is down in that position where he's like, gonna be living in a van by the river, where he's
down by the river.
Sorry. Down by the river. I know, and that's right when he's in David Spade's face and everything like that. But it's the exact shape of art.
Yeah,
it's hilarious. So I absolutely loved that connection, and then obviously the Dean Hardscrabble talk.
That artwork was incredible to see how Dean Hardscrabble began as a man,
right,
and morphed into a woman.
And it's crazy to think that they went with that as a male character for a year and a half. And then I think they said something like 6 weeks right before they decided that they needed to have the characters locked down. They decide they're going to change it. And then so they work on it for 3 weeks, and they said it gave the art department 3 weeks to really figure everything out and sculpt and do all these other kind of crazy things.
Yeah, and to give everyone an idea of what one of the art renderings looked like when Dean Hardscrabble was a male, he basically looked like a little, I'd say his chest was puffed out more, like Anton Ego. That's what he looked like. Kind of butlerish, but with his chest poofed out a little bit.
Okay.
But that's what he looked like. I'm sure that will be in the Art of book.
I sure hope so, yeah.
But that would be how I could describe it best.
All right, so the centipede. They pull it out in front of you. What do?
They didn't pull it out in front of me.
No, if they did. If you're at work one day and they pull this centipede out and they've got a guy wearing gloves holding this thing and saying...
they said that, if it bit you, it was not good.
Exactly. Yeah. What would you do?
The photos of that, we have it on our website. Of
the centipede?
Yes, the fun facts. But they had so many different photos of this centipede. So many different ones because they had to get all these kind of crazy angles. But yeah, ew, gross.
Yeah, and they said that I cracked up when they said it had graceful elements because of the wave of the legs when it moved, and I'm like, I don't know if I'd say that's graceful. It's kind of just straight up creepy.
It moves like a dance. I get it.
Oh, get out of town. So if you when you look this thing up, how big was it?
It was about the size of average guy's arm.
Like forearm?
Yeah.
Holy
cow.
cow.
He was holding it.
Oh, no way. So, all right, moving on from there, Scott Clark. The next class that Julie attended was Scott Clark, the supervising animator from Monsters University, and he taught dramatic arts, bringing a character to life. So in this one, we actually did cut one of the scenes that he is describing and pitching or talking about because it had a little bit of a spoiler in it, and we don't really want to spoil anything. You're not really missing all that much. A lot of it was very he was moving and very.
It's a funny scene in the film, and we don't want to spoil it for anybody.
Right, but like I said, you're not really missing a whole lot of details. It was just a lot of description about the scene itself, and until you see it, we didn't like Julie said, we didn't want to ruin it. Mm-hmm. So
it's like a 10-second scene, but it's really funny.
Yeah. All right, so let's just go ahead and listen to this, and then we'll pick up some more comments on the backside.
Yep.
My name's Scott Clark, and I've been an animator at Pixar for almost 17 years. I started I think I was the first animation intern when Toy Story came out, and my first film was A Bug's Life. And I've been a lead on 4 Pixar films. I started with Monsters Incorporated, actually, but I was a supervising animator on Cars, Up, and now Monsters University. And it's really fun to kind of go back to characters that I haven't seen for 10 years. It's like a family reunion or something. I'm going to try to explain how animation works in 20 minutes. It's almost an impossible task. It actually takes a long time to animate something because you're literally, going frame by frame through time, 24 frames a second. You're trying to create something from nothing. So it takes weeks to do seconds worth of work. So it could be very tedious to watch if you were to sit in my office and watch me do it. But we'll play around. I'll show you the model, show you how it works, and I'll show you a shot that I animated recently and kind of some waypoints, some decision points that I made along the way. What does an animator do? We are the ones that are the actors and the stunt people of this virtual world. So we are kind of making the same types of decisions that actors make when they're doing their craft, except they get 20 takes to perform it real time. We have to kind of, take a lot longer to try to figure out what the best take would be. So we'll try different things along the way, but we ultimately end up with the take because we can't do 20 versions of something. I've got the software here. This is called Presto. It's our own proprietary software up and running, and this is a shot. I can hit play. It won't run complete at 24 frames a second. It's running it looks like 8.6 frames a second there. But it's kind of going through showing you the final version of this shot that I did. And this is a scene, or a shot in a scene where there's a dance party at a fraternity house, and Sully is at first not participating. He's skeptical of kind of what happened in the scene before. Here is, in the lower left hand, this is the camera from the film, and this is kind of a scratch camera I can look at from any angle. I could pick any part of him and focus on that, and it'll rotate around his nose or finger or something. And I've got squishy in there as well. And I can actually pick different pieces of him and get these kind of widgets that show up. Now, everything can move in 3 directions. And in the computer world, or in our own world, it's 3-dimensional, right? We can move forward and back. We can move left and right sideways along this axis. And we can move up and down. There's 3 axes, and you can rotate each way as well. And each of these joints in the skeleton of Sullivan can do the same thing. I have multiple ways of moving his hand. I can click on it and get this kind of widget that gives me all these rotation points. So here's his wrist going forward, back, and unlike my skeleton, I can only bend my wrist this way or this way, almost 90 degrees, along the left axis. I can't even go, I can almost go 45 or 30 degrees that way. Sullivan, of course, because he's a computer model, we can do whatever we want. We have no limitations. So you have to know what they are as you're posing it. You wouldn't want to bend your wrist that way. That looks broken. Ow. So it is possible to break things. Here's another way I can pose him. I've got this spreadsheet here, and it shows time every frame here. And if I frame through it, it advances one frame at a time through my animation. And I can pull up his right arm, and here is the hand FB control down here. And without even having it selected, I can move that same control with this, and it tells me what value that is above or below 0. We're using the same principles of animation that they used in Snow White, and the animators that worked on that movie in 1937 weren't looking at animation as inspiration. They were looking at Charlie Chaplin, and they were looking at plays. They were inspired by life, and that's what we're trying to be inspired by. We're not trying to copy animation or something. And I even think of animation starting with like the cave paintings in France, where you see charcoal drawings of animals, and you'll see the same animal kind of in a couple different poses, and it is that animal. It suggests time. You'll see a hunter, 2 drawings, and say, oh, that's throwing a spear. And there was no film, nothing, but when you see them in the flight, the firelight flickers along them, you kind of see movement and time in your imagination. This is just an illusion. I am posing this virtual puppet 24 frames a second, so that when it plays back, it feels believable. It's like it's persistence of vision. It's a magic trick. But every decision, every movement in here was carefully thought out over weeks and talked about with multiple people, so that when it's done, hopefully the audience says, wow, John Goodman was great as Sully. And you don't think about the 70 animators that animated the physical part of his acting, because you just believe that character is alive and living and breathing. So I'm posing these through time, and I don't like to think of things in a spreadsheet way. This is just one tool I have to kind of precisely tell me what the numbers are. This is really the way I like to look at animation. And if I bring up his arms, these are all the animation in his arms here. We can go to his hand. I think his hand FB is right here. And I can move that same control, again, in this spline. But what's useful about this is I can see where that hand is moving along this path of time. It's kind of like an EKG or physics. It's like a pendulum or something. You can actually see that it's moving back and forth, and as he jumps, it's kind of probably doing something like boom, 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 or he's swinging it through or something. And every one of these splines represents one control of movement in the character. So this is everything in Sullivan. This is all of his animation, every spline. And if I zoom away, you can see there's probably a couple hundred in here. And this is how I can see, what his hips going up and down look like through time. So if I go to this, let's just zoom in on just this one control. This is the highest point he is in the shot right here is when he's doing this big jump. And you can see this is the highest. It looks like a jump, right? You can actually kind of almost imagine a little cartoon ball is going, whoop, that's his jump. He jumped here, he jumped there. So sometimes these things really literally look like the motion that they are. He even kind of has to come down a little bit before he goes up, because you need to get that energy to push up. So he goes down, up, and then he lands and then rebounds, and then he has some dancing going on here. And if I move this control, that's his hip TZ, or translate in the Z axis, the up and down axis. There's your techie nerdy animation term. So when I get the shot delivered to me, it comes from layout. So layout is the department that builds each shot. They put all the characters in, and they are the cinematographers. So where is the camera staged? Is there a pan? Is there a track? Is it a wide angle lens? Is it a long lens? Are they shooting from far away and zooming in? Is there depth of field? All the things that a cinematographer thinks of. And of course, there's all these characters they put in there. In the drawing, they just draw a bunch of squiggles. Oh, there's a bunch of background characters. Yeah, we actually have to make this. So this is kind of like kids playing with their action figures, like it's going over here. Very simple blocking. Do you guys have any questions?
Do you use something like Meet People with motion capture or something to sort of figure out a complex scene like that sometimes?
Well, you saw me like doing, this, right? I mean, you could hook a bunch of motion capture balls up to me, and it would look like me in a Sully suit. It wouldn't look like Sully, because Sully is a 900-pound caricature. He's a cartoon. So when I look at motion capture, all I see are cartoon character dudes in cartoon suits. I don't see believable characters. But when I see live action actors, I see believable characters. When I see animated characters, I see something that gets straight to the heart of the emotion. But I would never want to motion capture this. There's no way you can, because his arms are this long, his legs are this short. It's like it doesn't add up.
Scott, what was the direction you had on the character at 18? Because what we saw last night and what I'm seeing here, I just get this like laid back, Lebowski, Spicoli kind of vibe for Sully. Like, what was the direction of the character that would then help you animate?
Well, he's in a different spot than he was in Monsters, Inc. He comes from a more privileged, well, not privileged, I would say his father was a scarer, and so he comes from a talented family of scarers. So he's kind of big. He comes on campus, he's like, oh, he's a Sullivan. People know who he is just by his name, and it's like a kid who's got a famous dad or something. He kind of coasts in on that, and he is naturally talented, but he's like a lot of 18-year-olds. He's got to learn that you can't just be lazy and just float on that. Whereas Mike, it's his film, but he studies everything. He knows all the answers. So each of them has kind of a piece of it. They don't know it, but so it was fun. I thought Sullivan was very interesting to me in this film because there's some more character for us to grab onto that we didn't have in the first film. That who was he when he was younger?
I have a different type of question about the culture of being an animator. You said, and I've heard that if you do the job right, nobody notices it. I mean, how is that when you spend all this time, weeks, months, a year working on this, and it seems like it's released to audiences and we don't pick up on it? Our kids don't pick up on it, or adults don't pick up on it. How does it feel on your end?
That doesn't bother me. The people that do notice it are the young animators, aspiring animators that kind of start to dig in and go, I want to do that. And so that's fine, or people that are curious, that are just fans of it, that's fine. But that's me underneath there making those choices, but I don't have to be the one in front of the camera. I've done acting in front of a camera, and it's a different thing, but it's a live performance, and you're the puppet. It's weird, it's live. Like I've done improv before, where everything is happening. It's the opposite of animation at that moment. But if it's done right, any type of acting, whether it's improv or live action or animation, gets to it kind of a human truth. It's not just the first choice. There's deeper feelings and subtext under everything. Yeah.
All right, so I absolutely love his discussion about some of those technical elements that we were talking about at the beginning of the podcast, about hearing the lingo of Sully's TZ axis, about how the movement translates in the up and down Z axis. mind-blowing.
Yeah.
I love it because you hear that lingo elsewhere and I don't always know what it means, but hearing it in this context, you start to pick up on some of those, XYZ axis, and the T stands for the translate, so how does it translate along the axis? Love it.
Yeah, you would have really enjoyed this class, probably the most of all, because I know how much you are, really want to be, an animator, and to really see it kind of from, obviously a supervising animator standpoint. And he's showing us, he's literally in the program,
right, moving,
showing us. It
right.
was, it was almost a tutorial without being a tutorial.
Right. And I'm sure people that are listening to this podcast that have familiarity with, the animation programs out there are probably like, geez, this is all the way back to like day one kind of stuff. But for us, not having any exposure to it, our fandom comes from reading the books, which they don't talk about, the animation system.
Right.
It talks, watching the films, talking about it with other people, but it doesn't go into that level.
Yet.
You
don't know it yet.
Exactly.
You will soon.
Yeah, exactly. It's coming down there. So I also thought it was interesting when he talked about the limitations of the movements, where he talks about the fact that, again, Sully's wrist can move all the way back. It can, essentially break his wrist.
Oh, he was spinning it around and around.
But I thought it was so cool that, again, as a supervising animator, or as he even says, an actor as well, they have to be actors and knowing that motion and everything. You have to know those limitations not only of a human but of the character.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy how
a big monster.
Yeah. I think he says.
Weight.
Yeah, exactly. All that kind of crazy. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing. What a presentation. Would have loved to have seen it. So as far as from the final in today's 3-part episode is the third class that Julie went to, which she said was her favorite one of the bunch.
This was my favorite class.
Now, why?
It was my first class, too.
Okay.
Actually, it was like the first one of day 2. But it was, I don't know, from the moment we walked into the class, and this class was held in like a theater room, something similar to probably where like the dailies are maybe held.
Right.
There's
so anybody that may not know, again, the dailies are when they're working on a movie each day, as it's called, the dailies, the animators get together with the director and they sit in a room and they go through the shots that they worked on the day before, and the director tells them, tweak this, his face should be down a little more, he needs to look down a little. So it looked like you were describing it to me like one of those dailies rooms, potentially.
Yeah, it was big blue couches everywhere, and in the middle of the room there was computer screens and electronic equipment. At the very front of the room there was this huge screen, like where everything was, obviously being routed to, because you could see it from the computers, so everyone in the room could see. Also at the front of the room was this giant whiteboard, and then on the side of the walls were different caricatures of different animators, directors, producers within the film. So it's kind of neat to look and be like, hey,
yeah, exactly,
that character looks familiar.
Uh-huh.
So it was really, the atmosphere, I think, really got me. But it was actually Kelsey's passion, his enthusiasm. He talked really fast to try to get everything into the class.
I'm assuming that's how he naturally talks as well.
I think so. But for some reason, like that energy, it got me.
He packed a ton in there, and his voice, I said it to Julie, he sounds like David Arquette. He's so energetic, and he talks really, like you said, really quick.
But when he addresses you, and he recognized every single person in our room. Granted, there was 5 or 6 of us.
Right.
But at the end of the class, when we did our drawing, he looked at every single one of us,
right,
like in the eye, acknowledged us. He just seemed so gracious, so wonderful. I walked out of there knowing that, like, wow, if I could have a dream job, it wouldn't just be like consumer products. I would want to be in story.
Yeah, the story department.
How he discussed that, and just the ideas that you think about, I was blown away. This was my favorite class. I mean, I still can... every other class I remember, but this one, something happened to me.
I think it's the spirit of that room. I'm telling you, that's a dailies room. I've seen it on like the background. I don't know if that's one that they use often or if that's just a sub room, but that is the exact setup of what they are on all the behind the scenes on the DVDs. All right, so let's dig into this. Before we jump in, though, there were a couple spoilers, and there might be one or two. Nothing major, but the larger one is when he's doing an actual pitch. He actually goes through, okay, here's what would happen if we were physically pitching a scene to the story team, to the technical team, whoever. When they're pitching it, he's rolling through it, but there's a scene where it does give away a little bit too much, so we cut that out.
Yeah, he's actually rolling through a bunch of storyboards that were drawn by Jeff Pigeon.
And yeah, I know. God, what was it like seeing his work?
It was pretty spectacular.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously we're Jeff Pigeon fans, but yeah, no, it was really, I was like, oh my gosh. Like, that's incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, Kelsey, he did some drawings too, which were amazing as well.
Right.
But I think it's when you see someone that you feel like you followed part of their career for so long, and then you're just like, oh my gosh, I'm actually like looking at this.
The raw drawings.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
So that was really neat, but it did give away a little bit. Some of the, the scene, part of the scene are in some of the trailers, but we didn't want to, he describes it too much, and we didn't want to give any spoilers.
So we cut about 4 minutes of it out, but what you'll do is you'll hear the beginning of it, because we still wanted to give you an idea of what the pitch sounds like. So then you'll hear it fade out and then immediately fade back in where he says, so that's the pitch, or something to that effect. Mm-hmm. So you'll know exactly where it was cut out. So let's listen to Kelsey Mann's story, the Story Supervisor English 101 class, How to Tell a Great Story.
Hi, welcome everybody. Welcome. So I guess I'm going to talk you through the storyboard process of the film. It's a very long process. We're on the film for a very long time. I've personally been on for about 4 years. So I'm going to kind of rewind back to 4 years ago and kind of talk you from the very beginning to kind of where we kind of are today. And so the way we start, it's kind of hard to see over that monitor, but this is basically how we start. Big, empty, blank canvas staring us in the face. And that is the scariest thing we're going to see in the making of this film. It's very intimidating. You guys probably know, if you're painters or writers too, that blank page is just very intimidating. So we try to just get beyond that stage as soon as possible. And I think you guys all saw like the beginning of the film, right? The first like 30 minutes or something. Great. So this is how it began, up on a whiteboard. And what we do is we get together in the story room. It's this big, giant, long table with snacks and water and pads of paper and pens and stuff. And the story supervisor, like myself, the director, and then the writer are all in that room. And in our case, writers, we had 2 writers come on. It's actually 2 guys who wrote the original film came back. So we all get together and we just start talking about the film. How do we want it to begin? What's the first act break? What's the second act all about? And we just start talking for hours and hours and hours and days and days and days. And when we finally start to feel good about something, we just put it up on the board. Okay, let's just get that up there. Let's just start getting stuff basically on the canvas. Let's just start painting on the canvas so we can have something to react to. And so this is how we do it. And we more or less think very broad strokes, and then we get into the details of the film. So, for instance, okay, Act 1, got an opening scene, Mike, small monster in a large monster's world. We're like, oh, okay, that feels good. That feels like his story, what he needs to go through. Great. So then that solution to that problem is that he's going to become a scare. We're like, okay, cool. That feels like that's what the beginning of the scene should really be all about. And then maybe we'll start to get into some details of like, oh, maybe he goes on a field trip, to MI. So when we start to get that stuff down and start to feel good with that, then the writers will go off and they'll start writing pages. And then we'll, work chronologically. We may jump around a little bit, but basically they go off and start writing for a couple of days. In the meantime, we have all of our story artists sitting around waiting for those pages, but rather than having them just sitting idle, what we can do is help generate ideas for the pages. So there'd be a scene like, there's a scene called Semester Montage, which I think you guys saw yesterday, where Mike and Sully are trying to better each other throughout the first semester. That's a very hard scene to go off and write a montage scene like that. It's very difficult for a writer to just kind of jump in and start doing that. So what we do is we're like, hey, great, that's a very visually based, a lot of gags, a lot of funny stuff. We can generate ideas for that. So we'll hand that off to an artist and say, okay, I pitch it just like that. We take somebody, okay, you're doing the semester montage thing, Mike and Sully. Mike's got to get, has to be better at Sully in class. Come up with funny things, that clearly show that. So they go off for a couple days, come back, and they kind of show their work to the director and the writer and myself. And we're like, oh, that one's really funny. That one's great, but combine those two, and then you can do that, and okay. And then the writer will then fold that into the pages as they go forward. So really what we're doing is generating ideas. That's a lot of what we do in story. And sometimes we do that alone, like that. And other times we do it together as a group. And we'll get together and do like a brainstorming session. And it's basically in the story room, pads of paper everywhere, candy and all that good stuff. And we just start riffing off of an idea. This one in particular, this board here was for March Madness. We did like this commercial for the MU basketball team, learning they didn't make it into the Final Four. So all the monsters get really mad. So we're like, oh, what are funny ways monsters can get ticked off, So we just did a whole bunch of ideas, and it's really fun. It's kind of like improv. You're just like sitting there, you're riffing off of each other's ideas. Oh, that's hilarious. Oh, what if you did that? Oh, that's great. We're just just coming up with as many ideas as we can. And then at the end, you kind of go through it and you find the ones that really work. And sometimes it is like that, where you're all like, yeah, that's a good one. That's funny. That's hilarious. And the other time is where you're just like sitting, staring at each other, and no ideas are coming out. And usually when we get to that point, we just look up and draw the person across from us. So these are all caricatures of people, in the story department, and writers and directors and everything. So then the pages get written, and then we get to this point. It takes a while to get here. I think a lot of people think in story we just get this, but there's a lot that we help create this. So it's really a process where we're all working together. So now I've got my script, and okay, great. We figure out who's going to do this scene, who's really good at comedy. Okay, you're great at comedy. This is your scene. I think you'll knock it out of the park. Sometimes you'll have artwork, like artwork over here. Sometimes art is, usually they're following us pretty closely. The production designer, Nierva, has got a great saying. He's like, when stories zig, we zag. So they're just following us because we're going all over the place trying new things, and they're kind of just staying with us. So it's great. Sometimes we'll have artwork to kind of go from. But a lot of the times we don't have anything. If it says interior library, you're like, what does it look like? That's up to you. You're drawing it for the first time. You're like, oh my goodness, okay. So there's a lot of stuff. We're part designers too. So now the pages have been written. We've had a little handoff. The artist is going off and starting to work. And this is usually how people start. Usually on paper. Sometimes it's digital. But you start thumbnailing, just really roughly building out the scene. You can see this is actually a page of my thumbnails where I'm just thinking through stuff. I'm crossing out, I don't like that. I like this. Ooh, that's good. And more or less what I'm doing is I'm exploring the space and exploring where I'm going to put my camera, like a cinematographer would on a set, and figuring out where do I want the characters. What's the emotion of the scene? Is it supposed to be intimidating? Is it supposed to be scary? Is this an intimate scene? You're going to do your camera differently. And some people will actually sketch right on top of the script. And so you can see he's thinking, Matt here was thinking shots here, but he was also thinking poses. And ideas here, Mike's got a line of this was Fangs McDougal's room. And he's like, oh, maybe he's like just gently touching it, So it's that kind of stuff you think about. You're part actor, you're part cinematographer, you're part designer. It's really an interesting job story. You're doing a lot of different things all at once. So once you have that, then we start actually boarding and actually just jumping into drawing the scene. So there's a lot of work that kind of leads up to this point. I'll board a little bit for you guys. So I got my script. It says interior Uzma Kappa bedroom. which is that space right there in the middle. I'm like, okay, cool. I got a little bunk bed thing. That's cool. Suddenly the lights go out in the room. Sully flicks the switch. Nothing. Sully's like, great. So, okay, cool. I'm in the bedroom there. And, oh, by the way, I'm using a Wacom Cintiq. And it's kind of got this little pen, just like a Sharpie or anything. I can just sketch right on top of the monitor. It's just like drawing traditionally. It's a great, great tool. So, I'm like, okay, great. They're in their bedroom. I'm going to get a really rough perspective grid going. There's probably a door over here or something. And I'm working really rough and loose. I don't care too much about the details. You want to get the fundamentals down. You want to get your foundation working. It's not about making a pretty drawing. It's just about making kind of a clear drawing. Maybe a little indication of the ceiling or something. It looks like there's a little chair or something in the corner. I don't care too much about what's over there. Maybe a little shadow underneath, and maybe knock this back with a little indication of shadow. And there we go. There's the bunk beds. I've got maybe got a little switch, a little light bulb thing here. Okay, cool, great. Now I'm going to open this in Photoshop. Oh, by the way, I'm working in a program called Pitch Doctor. It's like an in-house program that we use to do our storyboarding in, and it works hand in hand with Photoshop. So we bounce back and forth between the two programs. And just in Photoshop, I have more features, more things I can do. So I'm going to dial back the opacity here, because I want you looking at the characters. I don't want you looking at the background too much. You know, it's just I'm focusing your eye where I want you to look. I can flip my pen around too, and use it the other side as an eraser. And you can see I'm not really overworking it. I'm just doing basic shapes to it. I don't really want to get into the nitty gritty of everything here. Just want to get the basic feeling and emotion down. Just want it to be clear. So I'm like, okay, that's cool. Maybe I do a little shadow. Put them on the ground a little bit. Okay, that's pretty good. I'm gonna open it up in Photoshop, because I don't quite like where I drew them. And this is great. Like working traditionally, this is a very difficult. You just can't do it. You know, you have to redraw it. But in Photoshop, I'm like, okay, cool. I'm gonna just transform them, make them a little bit smaller, and get them maybe rotate them a little bit, maybe right about there. So I'm like, oh, that looks pretty good. I like that. Here's kind of where it was, and then that's where it is now. And that feels like, oh, it's a better composition. I like that. And I don't care that I can see through the characters at this point. It doesn't really, you get the idea. That's in part why I just dialed back the opacity. So your eye is like, boom, going right where it needs to. And then I can go back into Pitch Doctor, and it's based on a timeline. So basically, you can see I've got one little panel here. I'm going to duplicate it, so now I got two. So boop, 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 boop. And the second one I'm going to open in Photoshop. And the script says the lights go out, so I'm going to have the lights like go out. Maybe somewhere around there. So now I've got two panels where it's the two of them arguing in their bedroom, and then the lights go out. And then I'm going to do a third panel. I'm going to duplicate this one. And I got a third one here. I'm going to open it up. I'm just going to turn off Mike and Sully. And now I'm going to sketch them like looking around. They're just like, huh? And you can see I'm flipping back and forth with the keys like a traditional animator would, from like drawing to drawing. I'm like flipping and seeing it move and animate. Maybe I want his hands to drop down a little bit. If I don't like that, maybe a little more like this. You see I'm just kind of drawing the overall shape of things. Like the movement of Sully's head there. Okay, he's turning and maybe he's looking up. A lot of us have like mirrors in our office and we're just making funny faces, or some people have roommates and you hear like people say like, hey dude, just can you stand up for a second? Can you just go like this? What? And you're like, oh, hold that, and then we just like sketch each other, because you want that clarity of the pose to kind of read. So yeah, so there we go. It's starting to feel pretty good. And you can see now, okay, they're in their bedroom, they're arguing, and then the lights go out, and then they're like, huh, what? And I can just keep adding more and more poses and more drawings and just kind of add on to it. And then what I do from that point is then we show that to the story supervisor, myself, and the director, and we see if it works. And then we're like, yeah, that's working pretty good. Do this change, that change, clean it up, and then we'll see it again. And so that's what this is here. I'll show you the final. Here we go. So here it is. This is done by Jeff Pigeon, and this is the final, like, cleaned up storyboard panel. And you can see it's still pretty loose, but it still communicates what it needs to communicate. It's not overworked or anything. We're just trying to make a blueprint for the film. So, and what happens is I get together with the story artist will come into the story room and basically do what we call as a pitch, which I actually will do for you guys right now. It's basically the director's in there, the writers, the story team comes in, the producer. A lot like this. It's kind of like an audience. It's kind of the first time that we're watching the scene unfold. And it's great because you're going to look up at the screen and kind of watch it, and I'm going to do my best to try to pitch you what the final will be. It's like telling somebody a story, you know, and there's an art to it. It's like if you ever had somebody, like a friend, try to recount a story that you were at, and then they're ruining it. You're like, no, you're not telling it right. Let me tell. There's a way to ruin a good joke, you know. So there's an art form to this. So I'm gonna jump in and just start pitching the scene. Okay. Some of you usually kick this off. They'll be like, okay, we're looking at Misfit Frat. This is a scene in the first act where, you know, Mike and Sully are, you know, going to the Uzma Kappa house for the first time, and neither of them really want to be there. And I'm like, okay, great, and then, you know, take it away. So Mike and Sully are in their bedroom there, they're arguing, and then the lights go out. Sully turns around and, yeah, great. And then we cut to the stairs, and we see their feet, like, tiptoe in. Guys? Hello? They come to a stop at the bottom of the stairs, and then we hear, this light comes over them, and they look around the corner, and this door, like, slowly opens with this kind of eerie light coming through. So that's basically a pitch, and then based off of that, we'll do notes, and we kind of have an audience, so we can see, okay, that didn't work, that wasn't funny, I'm not feeling anything, I don't care what happens, or, you know, and we just start doing changes basically to it. And so what a pitch is trying to do is I'm trying to sell you what the final film will ultimately look like. So that's why we do sound effects, we do goofy voices. You're just trying to sell the scene as best as you can. And then that gets sent off to the next department, which is editorial. And then they'll start cutting the scene and adding the music and adding sound effects and all that good stuff. And it just gets closer and closer to the final product as we go along. So I thought it would be fun to show you guys. I've drawn Mike Wazowski many, many times. In fact, each one of those images, we call them a panel. And over the course of the film, we've done, I think I know this number, 227,246 drawings. So I've drawn Mike Wazowski a lot. So I thought it'd be fun to show you guys how to draw Mike. If you guys want to grab your pads and, you can follow along with me. Yeah, it's a lot of drawings. Most of that stuff we throw out when we start over. You know, that's why it's so many. You know, we're just trying to get it as good as it can be. Here's how we draw Mike Wazowski. We have to have shorthands because we draw so many and so quick. We have a little bit of a shorthand. Like I draw Mike differently than they would in art. You know, with Ricky and Jason Deamer. So cool. So everyone thinks Mike is.
All right, so you heard that fade out a little bit there. That's where he actually went through a little bit of an instruction and giving some great tips on drawing Mike Wazowski. And Julie's drawing is, again, on our breakdown of Day 2 for the Monsters University event. Totally cool. I mean, like, he talks about the fact that, you know, people think Mike is round, but no, he has, like, that tapered, look, and that his legs taper in a little bit towards his feet, and that his arms taper, same kind of thing. Like, he talks about all the different little intricacies of Mike that you just don't necessarily see, and you can see a lot of those in your drawing that you drew there. And it was pretty cool too, because he talks about that shorthand right when it was fading out there.
Yep.
And that shorthand is different than definitely how more of like Ricky and all those other,
Ricky and Jason would draw.
The actual art department, how they draw, it's totally different. So it's really neat to see that. So we talked before we got into this about seeing Jeff Pidgeon's drawing. How was it watching Kelsey Mann draw in real life? Like, was it really fast? Was it really sloppy, or did it still come across detailed?
No, it was fast, but it wasn't sloppy at all. It was still really clean, even though these were really short, quick shorthand sketches. The program was wonderful. I mean, he basically drew kind of like just a bedroom scene. So he drew the bunk beds on one layer. He drew like the door frame, and then the second layer he drew Mike and Sully. Right. And then he decided, I kind of drew them too far apart. I want to move them closer, or I want to move them further apart. He could just basically click on one of the characters, select one of them, and move them up on the floor a little bit.
Right.
It was really fascinating.
How cool is that? I mean, obviously, like he said, that interplays with their Pitch Doctor program, which is their custom in-house program, and how that pairs with Photoshop, which is where you're getting more of the details and more of those layer elements. Mm-hmm. But I mean, think about that from a terms of, and he discusses it a little bit, but in terms of like, they usually start on paper just to like really quickly do it.
On the whiteboard. It starts first on the whiteboard.
Excuse me. I wasn't there. But it is crazy how it like starts and then like it gets to that program. How awesome is that program? I mean, the fact that they can just, move that one a little bit because we want to show that, a little differently.
Yeah, it was really neat. I mean, these are storyboards. It's incredible how detailed the storyboards really can be.
Right.
I mean, they're not generic drawings, but they're quick drawings, but they're quick but so detailed.
Right, you can still feel the story, you still get the sense of the story.
I mean, I know they need to be because they're giving them to the animators and stuff, but I loved this class. I wish I could have gone back and done this whole class again. Even though we talked about the same thing, I would have just loved to have just soaked it in again. More. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and what's crazy is like how many areas the storyboarders touch. And I got a sense of that from Matthew Lund, like I was talking about, but they touch the story team. So they help form and tweak some of the story. Obviously, they're not creating everything from scratch, but they do place elements there. They work with the design team. They're partially an actor because they have to determine how the character would be moving at that moment.
Right.
Obviously, again, once it goes to animation, they're going to put their spin on it, but they're creating like the base level for it. They think about it from a cinematography standpoint. Okay, what's the angle of this film? They get a script and they have to determine how is this going to look. I mean, that's crazy. Like, okay, this is going to be from this angle. And then the storyboarder has to know how to like draw in a flash in perspective as well.
Yes.
Literally like, okay, it's going to be from this corner of the room, so that means the vanishing point has to be over there, and they just whip that stuff up. It's crazy.
It is incredible.
Yeah. So it's just so crazy how many areas they touch and how much their influence travels throughout the entire film. Mm-hmm. From story to final animation. Crazy. Mm-hmm. Crazy. Really, really, really cool. Yeah. I mean, I got that same, I think to be in the story department when he's doing the pitching and you can hear the excitement in his voice and, the energy. Matt Lund was the same way. I think to be a story in the storyboarding group, mm-hmm. you have to have that energy and that passion to pitch because you need to sell your ideas.
Yes, it's kind of like, it's not just a confidence thing, it's I'll get up here, I'll talk, and I just, you have confidence, you have, this is my ideas, this is what I want it to happen, or this is how I see it happening. Right. And then, be critiqued and changed a little bit kind of thing, but they speak with such, just passion. Yeah, it's cool. I mean, we already talked a little bit about how much they define things, but I just remembered when they talk about the interior of the library, and he asks like, okay, so what's it look like? And they're like, well, we don't know. So you're drawing it for the first time. So what do you think it should look like? It's just crazy that they have to come up with all those things. Yeah. And draw it all from perspective. Mm-hmm. Perspective drawing is hard, especially when you've got to go fast. I'm sure they're doing a little bit of research to kind of see, okay, well, maybe I want the library to look like this kind of modeled after such and such a library.
I'm sure they have those ideas and those reference points, you're right. And then how cool would it be to be in some of those early meetings where they talk about that there's like just a huge table with all the pencils and paper and food and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
just
where
like
it starts from the whiteboard.
That would blow your mind, wouldn't it? That would be an awesome room to be in. Although he does talk about the fact that it's not always fun and games. It's not always like in the March Madness, where he talks about that video that they...
Oh, all that artwork was up on the wall too.
Okay.
That was incredible because you could see some of the monsters that actually made it into that short video clip.
Yeah.
And some that didn't. So it was really kind of neat, and some that were just, silly, that you knew that they were probably just like kind of...
Yeah, goofing around, just making fun. But it has to keep
It was neat. It was...
has to keep the flow going.
Yeah, it was cool. It was also neat to see that the color scheme stayed the same pretty much.
Right.
The purpley blues. I believe there was like a couple, like 2 reddish orange monsters, but the majority of them, obviously stayed in that blue purplish range.
Sure.
But it was so incredible to see that.
Yeah, it absolutely would have been mind-blowing. So the other thing that was cool too is that he talks about that there were, very specifically, 227,246 drawings, and most of them were thrown out. So like a lot of them were on whiteboards and paper. Mm-hmm. Now obviously when he's saying thrown out, a whiteboard just an erase. If he's talking about a digital, it's just deleted or moved off. But we're talking about paper here. So who wants to go dumpster diving at Pixar?
Yeah.
Obviously they don't just throw them out, and I'm kidding. But it's the first thing I thought of. I'm ashamed to say that that's the first thing I thought of. I'm like, I want to see those.
Yeah, exactly.
That would just be too cool.
Yeah.
All right, so anyways, that about wraps up episode 12 of the Pixar Post Podcast. Be sure to tune in next week where we'll have all the latest news again and continue our final installment in the Monsters University event. Again, this is going to be looking at some more of the technical details. Going to be a discussion with Kori Rae, the producer, and then we're going to recap a little bit on the discussion that was with Peter Sohn, who's the voice of Squishy in it, and it was, what did he talk about in that? Just to give a quick preview.
He talked about everything from Monsters University to The Good Dinosaur.
Okay, so he digs into that a little bit too.
He digs into that a little bit. It was basically a 20-25 minute Q&A. And
it was just like a lunch session, right?
Yeah, snack time.
I'm sorry, snack time with Squishy. And then we'll wrap up with a discussion of global illumination. So that's going to, blow the technical minds off of things.
Yeah, it was very technical, but very eye-opening.
Yeah.
Like, it's very involved, and it really does. This global illumination, I won't get into it, but it's helping the Pixarians on all these films with the lighting. It's so great. You won't want to miss it.
Well, yeah, I'm interested to talk a little bit more after it as well about what that means for the future of lighting in general and how that does, what does it do to the department? Does it skinny it down? Does it make it easier, harder? Don't say anything.
I won't say anything.
But that's what I want to discuss a little bit more of as well.
Yes.
All right, so be sure to tune into PixarPost.com all week for the latest Pixar news. Signing off for episode 12, I'm TJ.
And I'm Julie.
And we'll talk with you next week. Bye-bye.